Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a card using some of the newest Honeybee Stamps products that were released for January. And if you're familiar with Honeybee Stamps, they are switching from doing, it was almost like quarterly releases that were big to smaller monthly releases. So I'll have a link to the January release in the description box below the video because what I used was just like a small portion of the release and there's some really neat stuff worth checking out. So I also decided to do one of my black, white, and gold cards. This one has just a hint of red, you know? I like doing black, white, and gold. It's just classic, and I've done a lot. I'll at the end of this video, I'll post a link to my black, white, and gold playlist, and there's dozens of videos in that one. And this is another card where it's technically Valentine's, but also can be for anyone, because that's what I like to do. So everything I used, as always, is listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It is what helps pay the bills, keeps heaters going, enables me to keep bringing out content. And this one is also part of a video hop. So there's a bunch of fabulous designers sharing inspiration for this release. That info will be also in the description box below and definitely worth checking out. And that's it for all the housekeeping. Let's get into making the card. So to start off with, I'm using the Royal Flush stamp set, and this is a red rubber on cling foam set. Honeybee has done a few sets more recently that are red rubber on cling foam, and they are already like they're basically die cut. As you can see there, you just peel it out. And that's super nice because way back in the day, you know, back in the olden times, we used to have to do that all ourselves. Those that are newer to card making will not remember this, but stamps used to just come on like either sheets of red rubber or red rubber with cling foam. And you'd have to trim them out yourself with scissors, you know? Same concept as walking to school uphill both ways in the snow barefoot. We made it through the trials in stamping. Anyway, I chose just this one image. I like this set a lot, but I focused on just the Royal Flush of cards. And because it's red rubber on cling foam, I take out all the inserts out of my MISTI and I'm stamping it onto distress watercolor paper. And I had used my anti-static powder tool to start off with, and then stamped the images with clear embossing ink. I probably didn't need to stamp them multiple times because red rubber does stamp so well, but it's also habit. And I stamped it with clear embossing ink. I rotated the cardstock, stamped it a second time, and then I'm coating all of that with Simon Says Stamp Detailed Gold embossing powder. And then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool. And honestly, you could just leave it like this. You know, there's so much detail in this image that it just works. But I wanted to add just a little something, you know? So I just went through, melted everything till it was smooth and shiny and melted. And it will never get old for me. Like heat embossing things, especially with metallic embossing powders, is just, it's just magical. I love it. So after I heat embossed it, I'm going to do extremely simple watercoloring. I'm using two colors. I'm using Lost Shadow and Candied Apple Distress Inks. And I just mushed them onto my little plastic palette. And then I'm just using my little Tim Holtz detail watercolor brush. This is the same one I've been using for like a decade. I don't even know how long I've had this thing. It's years and years and years. And for the Lost Shadow, I am literally just slapping it on just to give it that little extra bit. Because it's a very, very light gray, just kind of following where all the detail sort of shading work is already on these images and just going over that with that Lost Shadow color. And then for the Candied Apple, I'm just filling in the hearts. That's it. And because the image was heat embossed, the heat embossing resists the ink, so I can just watercolor this on, let it dry, and we're good to go. And this little touch of red, I think just, like I said, gives it that just that little extra something. So after I did that, there is a coordinating wafer die set for this, and I just die cut both of these, and I'll revisit these a little later in the video. So I die cut them, and then I'm pulled out the Aces embossing folder. It's Honeybee's 3D embossing folder. And I'm using some Simon Says Stamp black cardstock. And off camera, I lightly misted the cardstock with water because this cardstock is very heavyweight. And this embossing folder is very detailed. Like, oh, so good. And with the Honeybee brand of folders and my Anna Griffin Impress machine, I have found that one cutting plate, the folder, and the magnetic plate is the perfect sandwich to emboss with. So that's what I did, ran that through, and I'm going to tilt this in the light to show, and you can see it better in my photos, but right here, like, look at that. Like, look at the detail. So good. But this is very heavyweight cardstock. This is one of the times where I highly recommend like lightly misting with water. It just softens the paper fibers so that it doesn't crack. Because I bet if I hadn't done that, all that detail would have cracked with such heavy cardstock. So I let it dry, because you don't want to try cutting your cardstock when it's wet either. So let that dry, and then I trimmed it down. It was a little bit bigger than A2 sized originally. So I trimmed it down to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And then I'm using the Lucky to Have You Sentiment wafer die, which has the word and the shadow. And the word I'd cut out from heavyweight white cardstock, and then the top layer I had die cut from matte gold cardstock. So I stacked 2 of the white cardstock layers together with craft tacky glue, and I don't know this specific font, I don't know what it is, but I just found it really satisfying tracing them. I don't know why. You guys, sometimes I don't know what goes on in my own brain. I just found it really satisfying tracing the font with my glue. I don't know. I was like, man, I wish I could write like this. My handwriting's atrocious. Anyway, 2 layers of the white cardstock. The top layer was the gold. The shadow layer I had die cut from vellum. So I'm going to adhere this. And then the final layer that I had die cut from the white cardstock, I'm going to adhere that to the back underneath the vellum for 2 reasons. One, that will pop the vellum up a little bit, so the vellum just lightly floats, which gives it a nice look. And 2, it makes it a million times easier to adhere this, because all I have to do is trace the cardstock with my adhesive and not trace on the back of the vellum, because adhesive shows through vellum. It's not pretty. And it's a little finicky sometimes, because if you apply too much glue and you don't realize it, and then you press it down and then the glue oozes out. So having that cardstock on the back, it helps a ton. So I adhered all that together. I had stuck it under one of my big acrylic blocks to let everything dry. And then back to these playing cards. I do not do this very often. I don't mind the white outline when I die cut images. It doesn't faze me. But for certain things, this is worth. And this didn't take very long because this was pretty simple. But because this is going on a black background and it's very obvious, and the card itself is just not busy, so it's just obvious. So I am going around the outside of the image with a black marker. I'm using a Copic black marker here, but any black marker would work. And I've talked about it a lot in videos. Like, it's like, don't use your alcohol markers with heat embossed images. I've said that. It's true. I still stand by that, because heat embossing, there's something in the heat embossing powder that doesn't play nicely with alcohol markers. But for this, I'm not coloring over it, for one. I'm barely even touching it. The other thing I say too is I don't like using my alcohol markers on like watercolor paper. It works, as you can see, but watercolor paper will like soak up your markers, and you will dry out your markers way faster than you think is possible. But again, for something like this, totally fine. And also, I don't use my black marker, like, ever, especially when I'm coloring, because I use like grays to shade and do all that sort of thing. So that black Copic marker, and I've had that thing for like 15 years. That's all I use it for, basically, is things like this. So I did that edging, and it just kind of made things look better. And then I adhered them to my background, and then I adhered the sentiment on top, and then I couldn't resist. I wasn't going to add splatter, but I had to do it. But I was very demure with it. I didn't go crazy. I didn't add 4 different kinds of splatter and everything with the kitchen sink. I just put a little bit. This is Picket Fence Studios Liquid Gold Paper Splatter Watercolor. Love. And I put just a little dot of it onto my palette. I'd put the background in my splat box, use my fan brush, and added just a nice little bit of splatter. Who'd have thunk? Am I going to add 15 types of splatter to the next card? Probably. But you know, sometimes I can be a little more conservative with it. So I added that little bit and let it dry. And then I've got another panel here of just white cardstock that's smaller than A2. It's like 4 by 5.25, something like that. Just smaller than A2. And I'm going to stamp those playing cards with the Lost Shadow ink. And I'm going to rotate it, stamp it a second time, because this is going to go on the inside of the card. Because my card base is going to also be black cardstock, which I could leave, and then you could just use like a gel pen or like a paint pen to write on the inside. It just, again, depends on my mood. But I thought it'd be cute to just put this white panel on the inside, because then I could stamp the playing cards. And then I also stamped a sentiment from the So Lucky set. And this is what I meant in the beginning. Like, this is a card I would give to anyone, you know, for any occasion, really. It's being included in my Valentine series, but this to me is what I call an any occasion card. Just to tell someone you're lucky to have them and they're the best, you know? So I adhered that panel to the inside of the card. I adhered the card front to the card base, let that glue dry. And then my final bit of embellishment, I dug through my stash and I have these Onyx Heart baubles from Trinity Stamps. Perfection. They're a little hard to see on camera. My camera, like my filming camera, really like, this is what that black cardstock looks like in real life, and so you don't see that detail though. So these heart baubles almost like disappear into it, but yeah, they have that like oil slick look to them. So I just stuck a few of those onto the card front, adhered them into place with craft tacky glue, and then let them dry. And then this card was complete. So the pictures at the end, you get a better look at that embossed background, because my camera was having a hard time, especially with like the reflection of the metallic and everything. But I really like this embossing folder. I like all of Honeybee's embossing folders. They're so good. So anywho, like I mentioned in the intro, I'll have links to all of the things in the description box below the video. So you just expand that. All the info will be there for those that are interested. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping and commenting. It helps a ton and I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!